The need for a new constitution? Today we will see why we need for constitution. Before going to the details, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more valuable videos. The Articles of Confederation. During the Revolutionary War, the United Colonies needed a document to govern the lands then struggling to be free from England's rule. The Articles of Confederation became the first national constitution of the United States in March of 1781. The Articles of Confederation established a government organized around a Congress. Each of the 13 states would only have one vote regardless of size or population. For a law to pass, 9 of the 13 states had to agree. The Congress had the power to declare war, make peace, and make treaties. It could also coin and borrow money, create post offices, admit new states, and create an army and navy. On the other hand, the Congress could not tax, and it could not control or interfere with trade between the individual states. There was no one person who was in charge of this new government. Because they feared the return of tyranny, the Founding Fathers were very cautious not to create a new king. That was exactly why they had separated from England. So, as a result, there was no executive to carry out the laws passed by Congress. Ultimately, this lack of a leader caused much confusion. The Articles of Confederation created a loose friendship between the 13 states. This loose friendship was enough to win the war for independence and keep the states together as one country. But without an executive, the power to tax, and the ability to regulate trade, the Congress could not function effectively. Many Americans felt the Articles of Confederation needed to be revised. By 1786, more problems were beginning to surface. A convention of 5 of the 13 states, called the Annapolis Convention, met at Annapolis, Maryland, in September 1786. They met to study the trade problem. There was not enough representation to make any big decisions, so the delegates, led by Alexander Hamilton, New York, and James Madison, Virginia, called for another convention to begin in May 1787 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In February of that year, Congress agreed with the delegates and stated the convention would have the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. The Constitutional Convention opened in Philadelphia in May 1787 and finished its work in September. The delegates to the convention were not elected by the people, but instead were selected by their state legislatures. The delegates to the convention were men of great ability. Many had fought in the Revolutionary War, many were educated, and many were wealthy. They were men of great power and influence in their own states. Eventually, 2 would become presidents of the United States, 1 a vice president, and 26 would serve in Congress. All in all, there were 65 official delegates, but only 55 made it to Philadelphia. The average attendance at each day's meeting was about 30. George Washington, a delegate from Virginia, was chosen to be the president of the convention. At first, the purpose of the convention was to revise the Articles of Confederation, but very quickly, the delegates decided to replace the Articles with a new plan for government. 2 important leaders were absent from the convention. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, who were influential in writing the Declaration of Independence, were in Europe serving as ambassadors to other nations. Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania was the oldest delegate at 81 years old, and Jonathan Dayton of New Jersey was the youngest at 26. Other delegates present were Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. There was one state that refused to send delegates to the Constitutional Convention. Rhode Island did not send any representatives to Philadelphia. During those 5 hot summer months in 1787, the 55 delegates struggled to create a more flexible form of government for the new United States. The most serious task that faced the delegates was how to achieve a balance between liberty and authority. There were many different viewpoints and opinions on how to go about that task. The concept of compromise unified the differences into a supreme document capable of representing the opinions of all Americans. The Constitution that resulted from this historic convention is now over 200 years old. No other written constitution has lasted as long as the Constitution of the United States. Compromise. Without compromise in 1787, our government would have collapsed in its infancy. Compromise is a settlement in which both sides give up something in order to reach an agreement. There were many different compromises made during the Constitutional Convention. The most important compromises dealt with how our government would be set up. A major concern of the delegates was how to set up the law-making body of our government, the legislative branch. How should states be represented in the legislative body? Who would have control, the small states or the large states? This issue threatened to destroy the convention. Eventually, the delegates came to an agreement known as the Great Compromise, which combined the best of the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan. The Virginia Plan was proposed by the states having the larger populations. First, they suggested that the lawmaking body be called Congress. This Congress was to be bicameral, having two houses. The first house would be elected by the people, and the second house would be elected by the first house. The number of congressmen was to be determined by the population of the state. The larger states liked this plan because they had a larger population and, as a result, would be able to control the government. They favored a plan based on population. An alternative was the New Jersey Plan supported by the smaller states. First, the small states proposed a Congress that was unicameral, having one house, with each state having the same number of representatives or votes. The smaller states would then be equal with the larger states. They favored a plan based on equality. Eventually, a compromise was reached. The compromise became known as the Great Compromise, because without this basic issue settled, the convention would have failed. The Great Compromise called for a bicameral Congress. The first house was to be called the House of Representatives, with representatives elected by the people for a 2-year term. The number of representatives each state could elect would depend on the population of the state. This pleased the large states. The second house was to be called the Senate, with senators elected by their state legislatures for a 6-year term. Each state would have 2 senators. This pleased the small states. The Great Compromise had succeeded. Both sides got what they wanted. Thank you for watching. Please share your thoughts in the comment below. Have a great day every day.